My name is Luna Price. I am 32 years old. 4 years ago, my husband Alexander Morgan blindsided me with the demand for a divorce and every asset we had built together while we sat in the mediation room at our family lawyer's office after our son's school awards ceremony. He declared he would take the house, the cars, and his entire construction business, and that I could keep our son like some leftover obligation he was generously allowing me. What he did not know was that I had uncovered his enormous hidden debts years earlier and had spent every quiet moment since preparing my quiet exit strategy. Now everything was colliding in that same mediation room with the paper spread out and his smug expression beginning to crack as my lawyer pushed the full liability disclosure across the table toward him. I sat there with my hands folded and felt a calm resolve settle over me because I knew I was finally ready to choose myself no matter how lonely the road ahead might be. If you have ever been blindsided by someone you trusted completely with your life and your future, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one, and it reminds me I am not the only one who has walked this path. Let me take you back to the beginning so you can see exactly how we reached that mediation table and how a woman everyone wrote off as defeated actually held the quiet power the entire time. I met my husband when I was 18 years old. I had just finished high school a year early because I was practical and eager to start earning my own way instead of staying under my parents' roof any longer. I landed a job as a file clerk at a small insurance agency right here in the suburbs outside Wilmington, Delaware. The pay was modest, but it was mine, and I worked my way up to customer service supervisor within 2 years because I was good with details and even better at keeping my head down while my eyes stayed wide open. My husband was 23 when we crossed paths at a local business networking event. He was charming and full of big talk about launching his own construction and real estate development company. He painted pictures of the future like they were already real, and I was the practical one who offered to help him organize the paperwork. We got married when I was 19. Our son Levi came along when I was 21. I kept my job at the insurance agency part-time while raising him and building up my own retirement savings because my grandmother had always drilled into me that a woman should have something that belonged only to her no matter what. For the next several years, I poured everything I had into supporting my husband's vision. When his business finally took off when I was 26, I stepped back from my own career to help him full-time. I handled the books, managed client communications, coordinated with contractors, and kept the household running smoothly while still being the primary parent for Levi. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. I did it without complaint because I believed we were building something together, even though the credit and the spotlight always went to him alone. The shift happened gradually. My husband started making major decisions without consulting me. He stayed out later and later for work, and the little criticisms began. The way I dressed, the meals I prepared, my supposed lack of ambition. I was managing his entire back office for free while raising our son and keeping our lives organized, but somehow I was the one who was not ambitious enough. Then 4 years ago, everything changed in one ordinary evening. I was reconciling the company accounts late one night after Levi had gone to bed. A transfer to an unfamiliar account caught my eye, and then another and another until the pattern became impossible to ignore. I stayed up until nearly dawn following the paper trail. What I uncovered made my stomach drop. The house we lived in had 3 separate mortgages totaling $1,400,000 owed, while its actual market value sat at only $1,100,000. We were underwater by $300,000 on a home I had always believed we owned outright. The construction business was in even worse shape with lines of credit maxed out at $250,000 back taxes of $90,000, vendor debts of $130,000, and equipment loans of $80,000. The cars were all leased with massive balloon payments due soon. Add in cryptocurrency losses, gambling debts, and an apartment rented for someone I did not know about, and the total debt came to roughly $1,800,000 against assets worth maybe $1,500,000. We were $300,000 in the hole and sinking fast. My first instinct was to confront him immediately, but I knew my husband too well after 13 years of marriage. He would twist the facts, make me doubt myself, and probably find a way to blame me for noticing. Worse, he might try to seize the modest separate savings I had protected all along. I had rolled over my retirement account from the insurance agency years earlier, and it had grown to about $190,000. Plus, I had inherited $280,000 from my grandmother when I was 27 and kept it in a completely separate account, never commingled with anything marital. That money was legally mine alone, and I intended to keep it that way. Instead of confronting him, I did what any woman who had been underestimated for years would do. I protected myself, and I waited. I worked with a trusted family accountant to place my retirement funds and inheritance into an irrevocable trust for Levi's future. My name stayed off the beneficiary list as the primary protector, and my husband's name was nowhere near it. I printed every document, every mortgage statement, every suspicious transfer, and stored copies in a safe deposit box and with my older sister. I saved everything on an encrypted drive. And then I smiled at dinner parties and acted like the supportive wife while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. I got very good at pretending. 4 years of watching him dig the hole deeper. 4 years of listening to him brag about his thriving business while I knew the truth. 4 years of waiting for the day he would finally decide he deserved more than what we had built together. I knew men like him eventually got bored or found someone younger or convinced themselves they were entitled to start over clean. I just had to be ready when it happened. The announcement came during an ordinary Tuesday evening after Levi's soccer practice. My husband sat me down in our living room with that same businesslike expression I would later see in the mediation room. He told me he wanted a divorce. He wanted the house, the cars, the business, everything. I could keep Levi. He said it like he was ordering takeout. I will take the assets. You keep the kid. Thanks. I stared at him across the coffee table and realized 13 years of marriage had just ended between the remote control and a half-empty water glass. What followed was a masterclass in slow humiliation. Within days, he moved me into the guest room. My closet space shrank dramatically. He began bringing Willow Cooper around. She was 25 years old and worked as an administrative assistant at one of his job sites. She had that polished social media look, and she walked into my kitchen like it already belonged to her. She wore my favorite apron while blending smoothies and laughed a little too loudly at his jokes right in front of me. My husband paraded her through the house like a trophy. They sat on my couch, watched my television, ate off my plates. He would put his arm around her while I was still living there, as if I had already become invisible. The financial cuts came next. He canceled my personal credit card first with a casual comment about separating finances. Then the joint card. Then he suggested I should probably start looking for somewhere else to live while things got sorted. My own home and I was being asked to leave. My mother-in-law, Linda Morgan, showed up one afternoon with her perfectly styled hair and her practiced sympathy smile. She had always treated me like hired help rather than family. She went through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes, fine. Family photos, some of them. My grandmother's recipe box, she hesitated on that one like she was considering claiming it. Anything of real value was off limits. Those were marital assets, she explained, and my husband was entitled to them. She packed my things into cardboard boxes, but the message was the same. I was being removed like unwanted clutter. Through all of it, I had one person I thought I could trust, my best friend of 19 years, Ivy Scott. We had been inseparable since high school. She was the first one I called after the announcement. She came over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better and that my husband was making a terrible mistake. But little things started to feel off. My husband seemed to know my plans before I made them. When I mentioned to my best friend that I was thinking about fighting for more time with Levi in the custody arrangement, my son came home the next day repeating my husband's exact arguments. When I told my best friend I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, my husband made a pointed comment about that exact area being too expensive for someone in my position. It clicked one afternoon when I saw a text notification on my best friend's phone while she was in the bathroom. She had been feeding him information for months. My best friend of nearly 2 decades had been carrying a quiet torch for my husband the entire time. He had given her just enough attention and empty promises to keep her loyal. 19 years of friendship traded for flirting and the hope that she might become the next Mrs. Morgan once I was gone. The betrayal stung deeper than anything my husband had done because I had chosen her as family. The worst part was watching Levi get pulled into the middle. My son was 13 and smart enough to notice the new watch my husband bought himself while claiming money was tight for Levi's school activities. He noticed Willow's shopping bags piling up while his father complained about bills. Levi started pulling away from me, not with anger, but with confusion and distance. My husband was feeding him a steady stream of comments about how I was the one making things difficult and dragging everything out. Levi did not know who to believe, and his father was very convincing. I hired my lawyer, Maya Brooks, after my old insurance agency contacts recommended her. She was 51 years old and had zero tolerance for games. She reviewed my situation and laid out a clear plan. "You helped build that business," she said. "You are entitled to half of everything. We fight." I looked at her for a long moment and asked, "What if I do not want to fight?" She stared at me like I had suggested we send my husband flowers. I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with Levi. The place was modest, with a kitchen the size of my old pantry. Half our boxes stayed stacked in the corner of his room like a reminder of how quickly life could shrink. Meanwhile, my husband posted photos with Willow on social media, talking about new chapters and fresh energy. My mother-in-law commented with hearts and praise. Everyone saw a woman who had given up. Everyone was wrong. I placed 3 thick binders on Maya Brooks's desk during our next meeting. 4 years of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden transaction. She read in silence for nearly an hour. When she looked up, the pity in her eyes had been replaced by something closer to respect. "You have known about this for 4 years," she said. "I was waiting for him to make his move," I told her. "I knew he would eventually. And when he demands everything, he demands all the debt with it. He just does not understand that yet." Maya leaned back in her chair. The trap was already built. The numbers were verified. The documentation was airtight. All I had to do was let my husband think he was winning. Nobody plays the gracious loser better than a woman who has been practicing for 13 years. The next several weeks were a careful performance. I showed up to every meeting with red eyes and trembling hands. I asked for so little that even the mediator looked uncomfortable. "I just want enough to start over," I said softly during one session. "I know the business is his life's work. I do not want to tear our family apart more than it already is." I requested a settlement of $40,000 cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Levi. That was it. My husband agreed immediately. He looked at me across the table with something almost like pity, like I was a wounded animal he was kindly putting out of its misery. His arrogance grew with every passing day. He stopped being careful. He told his golf buddies that I had simply given up. My mother-in-law bragged at her church group that her son was keeping everything and that I had not gotten a dime. To celebrate his coming victory, my husband bought himself a new watch for $14,000 and took Willow to an expensive steakhouse where we had once celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted the photos online. "Life feels right when you are with the right person," he wrote. Willow had started redecorating the house, painting my carefully chosen sage green kitchen, a cold builder-grade gray. It felt symbolic in the worst way. My best friend kept calling under the guise of friendship, fishing for information. I played along, making my voice crack when I told her I just wanted it all to be over. Within hours, my husband would know and relax even more. My best friend thought she was playing me, but she was only delivering messages for free. Behind the scenes, Maya prepared the final documents with surgical care. The main agreement showed me relinquishing all claims to marital property. Attached was the detailed liability disclosure listing every debt tied to those assets. When my husband signed, he would legally assume everything. 2 weeks before the scheduled final hearing, Audrey Reed, my husband's lawyer, called Maya with concerns. She wanted a full financial review. Maya kept her voice neutral and agreed to provide documentation. When Audrey brought the request to my husband, he shut it down immediately. No audits, he said. I built that company. I know what it is worth. I am not paying for some outsider to second guess me. Audrey pushed back, but my husband was impatient. Willow wanted the divorce finalized quickly. He signed a waiver acknowledging that he had been advised to do the review and had refused against counsel's recommendation. The morning of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I woke up in the small apartment with Levi still asleep in the next room, the boxes from our old life finally unpacked, but still feeling temporary. I got dressed in the simple navy dress I had chosen for the occasion. Nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention. I wanted to look exactly like the woman everyone assumed I had become tired, defeated, ready to sign anything just to make the nightmare stop. My old colleague from the insurance agency days, Sarah Mitchell, had offered to drive me to the courthouse for moral support. She had been one of the few people who stayed in touch after I left my job to help my husband build the business, and she knew enough about the situation to understand why I needed someone steady in my corner today. We met in the parking lot outside the family court building. Sarah gave me a quick hug and said, "You have got this, Luna. Whatever happens in there, remember, you protected what really matters." Her words steadied me more than she probably realized. Inside the courtroom, the air felt thick with the usual quiet tension of legal proceedings. My husband arrived first, of course, wearing the charcoal suit I had helped pick out years ago for an important client meeting. He looked confident, almost relaxed, shaking hands with his lawyer, Audrey Reed, like this was just another deal he was about to close. Willow waited in the hallway, scrolling her phone and shooting him encouraging smiles through the glass doors. My mother-in-law sat in the gallery, dressed up as if she were attending a victory brunch afterward. She glanced at me with that small, satisfied smile she always wore when she thought she had already won. My lawyer, Maya Brooks, and I took our seats. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s named Margaret Klein, entered, and everyone rose. She reviewed the file briefly, then looked over the top of her glasses. "Morgan versus Morgan," she said. "Final dissolution hearing. I understand the parties have reached an agreement." Audrey stood first and confirmed that my husband would be assuming all marital assets. Maya confirmed the terms on my side. The judge turned her gaze to me and asked the standard questions about whether I understood what I was giving up and whether I was entering the agreement voluntarily. I kept my voice soft and slightly unsteady, exactly as we had rehearsed. "Yes, Your Honor, I just want this to be over." The clerk began distributing the final documents, page after page of legal language. My husband signed quickly, barely glancing at the pages, eager to get back to his new life. I signed slowly, deliberately feeling the weight of every stroke of the pen. This was the moment I had prepared for over 4 years. Across the room, my husband glanced toward the gallery where my mother-in-law sat and gave her a small nod of triumph. Audrey Reed was doing what good lawyers do, flipping through the complete package one final time. She reached the addendum, the liability disclosure statement. I watched her face change first. Confusion, then a quick double check of the pages. She leaned toward my husband and whispered something urgent. He waved her off at first, still basking in what he thought was victory. "Not now," he muttered. "We're almost done." But Audrey's voice grew sharper. "You are assuming all the debt, the mortgages, the business lines of credit. Everything is listed here as your sole responsibility." My husband finally looked down at the papers. For a second, he just stared. Then an incredulous laugh escaped him loud enough that the judge glanced up. "This has to be a joke," he said, his voice carrying across the courtroom. These numbers are made up. She hid this from me. This is some kind of fraud. The laugh turned into something sharper, more aggressive. He jabbed a finger toward me. You planned this the whole time, didn't you? Pretending to be the quiet little wife while you were setting me up to take the fall for everything? After everything I gave you. The judge's voice cut through the air like a whip. Mr. Morgan, sit down. But he stayed on his feet, turning his anger directly at me now. You think you're clever? You think you can just hand me a mountain of debt and walk away clean after 13 years of me building everything from nothing? His tone dripped with the same cold sarcasm he had used on me so many times in private, but now it was public, aimed straight at my chest. You were never ambitious enough to build anything yourself, and now you want to destroy what I created. Pathetic. Maya stayed calm, but I could feel my own pulse racing. The judge reviewed the waiver my husband had signed weeks earlier, the one where he had refused the independent financial review against his lawyer's advice. You had the opportunity to verify these figures, Mr. Morgan. You chose not to. The agreement stands as written. My husband's face cycled through disbelief into raw fury. He slammed a hand on the table, not hard enough to be contempt, but loud enough to make everyone in the room shift. I want to withdraw this right now. I didn't understand what I was signing. She manipulated the whole thing. The judge shook her head. These are your debts, Mr. Morgan. Your signatures are on every document. The agreement is final. The gavel came down. My husband turned to me one last time before I stood up, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that only I could hear. You'll regret this, Luna. You think you're walking away free? You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I smoothed my dress, picked up my purse, and walked out without looking back. Sarah Mitchell was waiting in the hallway. She had heard some of the raised voices through the door and gave me a tight hug. That was intense, she said quietly. But you held your ground. In the distance, I could already hear my husband's voice rising again as he argued with Audrey Reed. Willow had disappeared from the hallway by the time I reached the elevator. My mother-in-law tried to follow me out, calling after me once, but I kept walking. The first few days after the hearing felt strangely quiet on the surface. My husband posted nothing new on social media. Willow moved out of the house within a week, leaving behind a note that apparently said this was not what she had signed up for. My mother-in-law tried one last approach, calling Levi and asking him to pass along a message that she had never known about the debts and that maybe we could all sit down as a family for Levi's sake. When Levi relayed it to me that evening, I took the phone from him gently and told her directly that I appreciated the thought, but all communication about our son would go through the custody agreement from now on. No more surprise visits, no more messages through him. Her voice sharpened on the other end with that familiar edge of superiority she had always used on me. You are really going to cut everyone out like this, Luna? After everything my son did for you? I answered calmly that I was not cutting anyone out. I was simply protecting the peace I had finally earned. She hung up without another word, and that was the last I heard from her. My best friend reached out one more time as well, this time through a long text that arrived late one night. She said she had been thinking about our 19 years of friendship and how she never meant for things to turn out this way. I read the message twice, then typed back a short reply that I was focusing on Levi and my own life now, and wished her well, but I would not be responding to anything further. The text sat unread on her end for days. Some friendships simply cannot be salvaged once the trust is gone, and I was learning that letting go was part of the price I had chosen to pay. To keep myself moving forward, I enrolled in evening interior design courses at the local community college. It was something I had dreamed about years ago, before I set it aside to help my husband build his construction company. The classes were small and practical, nothing glamorous, but they gave me a sense of purpose I had not felt in a long time. My old colleague Sarah Mitchell checked in regularly and even connected me with a small job helping her neighbor Rachel Ellis redo her home office. Rachel was a new face in my life, a graphic designer who worked from home and had just gone through her own quiet separation. She became a casual friend over coffee and paint samples, someone who understood the weight of starting over without needing every detail of my story. Yet even with Rachel's easy company, I found myself holding back, keeping conversations light, and never quite letting anyone all the way in. The boundaries that had protected me in court were now keeping everyone else at arm's length, and I could feel the isolation settling in like a quiet fog. My husband's situation continued to unravel in the background, though I only heard fragments through Sarah's loose connections in the local business network. Vendors were filing claims, the house sat on the market with no serious offers because of the mortgages, and he had apparently started meeting with bankruptcy attorneys in earnest. Once he tried to reach me directly again, this time through a late-night call that I let go to voicemail. His message carried the same biting sarcasm that had always cut deep. "You must be feeling pretty satisfied right now, Luna, living in your little apartment while I clean up the mess you helped create. At least have the decency to let Levi spend more time with me before you turn him completely against his own father." I deleted the message without replying and blocked the number. Every sharp jab he threw was a reminder of why I had protected myself years earlier, but it did not bring any sense of triumph. It just left me tired. Levi and I settled into a routine that looked stable on the surface. I went back to part-time work at a small insurance agency to cover the basics while the $40,000 cash settlement helped with the security deposit and basic furniture. He kept up with school and soccer, and we painted the apartment together one weekend, turning the tiny kitchen into something that felt a little more like home. Yet there were moments when the loneliness hit hardest, like when Levi would mention a funny story his father had texted him, or when Rachel would invite me to a neighborhood gathering, and I would find an excuse to stay in. I had chosen myself. I had chosen to stop being the unpaid everything for a man who never saw my value until it was too late. But the cost was this quiet apartment, the careful distance I kept from everyone, and the knowledge that the family I once had was gone for good. One evening after Levi had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table again, the same spot where I had closed the door on my husband weeks earlier. I looked around at the modest space, the second-hand couch, the small stack of design textbooks on the counter, and felt a strange mix of peace and emptiness. I had my son's future secured in the trust, my own separate savings untouched, and a slow path toward the career I had put on hold for 13 years. No one could take those things from me now. But there was no cheering crowd, no dramatic moment of justice where my husband admitted everything and begged for forgiveness that I could graciously deny. There was only me choosing the boundaries that kept me safe and accepting the isolation that came with them. I thought about my grandmother's words more often these days. A woman should have her own money, not secret money, just her own. She had been right, but she had never warned me how heavy that independence could feel when it meant walking away from every other connection. My husband had demanded everything except Levi, and in the end, I gave him exactly what he asked for. The difference was that I finally understood the true weight of what I had given up. In return, the illusion of family, the ease of belonging, the comfort of being part of something larger than myself. I had protected my son and reclaimed my future, but the road ahead was narrower and quieter than I had imagined it would be. This is the part no one talks about when they cheer for the woman who finally stands up for herself. The victory is real, but it is also lonely. I do not regret the choices I made. I would make them again in a heartbeat. Still, on nights like this, sitting in my small kitchen with the sage green walls I chose myself, I feel the full cost of drawing those firm lines and refusing to cross them again. Thank you for listening to my story all the way through. It still hurts to tell, but it also feels important to share, because I know there are others out there carrying similar secrets and wondering if they are strong enough to choose themselves when the price is this high. If you have ever set a boundary with someone you once loved and felt the loneliness that followed, tell me in the comments what that moment felt like for you. I read every single one, and knowing we are not alone in this makes the quiet nights a little easier to face.